story, What Really Happened to the Morgan Family? The Dark Truth Revealed. Part 1. The Whisper That Never Left. There are stories we stumble upon that cling to us, quietly, tightly, like a breath caught in our lungs, never quite letting go. This is one of them. It begins on a cold Sunday morning in early March, in the quiet mist of Asheville, North Carolina. Birds hadn't begun to sing yet, and the air still carried that late winter stillness. But what happened just minutes later would mark this town with a silence far deeper than seasonal quiet. A silence born from grief, from something no one could explain. Robert Morgan, a local history teacher and devoted father of 6, had just kissed his 2 youngest daughters goodbye. Lily, 12, and Maya, 7, were walking hand in hand with their neighbor's son, headed toward St. Adelaide's Church for morning mass. They wore white cardigans, their Sunday best. It was a short walk, one they'd done dozens of times before. Nothing about that day suggested tragedy was just around the corner, but 5 minutes later it struck. A green 1990 Buick tore across the center line of Blue Fern Avenue. Witnesses said it wasn't just swerving, it was accelerating. The car jumped the curb and plowed straight into the children. Lily and Maya were killed instantly. Their small bodies never stood a chance. The neighbor boy, Anthony, was thrown nearly 20 feet into a front yard. He died before paramedics could arrive. The car didn't stop. It continued down the sidewalk, smashing fences and garbage bins for almost another block before finally slowing to a halt in the middle of the street. Behind the wheel sat a middle-aged woman, dazed, almost disconnected from reality. "Did I hit something?" she reportedly asked a bystander. Her voice was quiet, detached, empty. The woman's name was Judith Barnes, a 43-year-old widow from out of state. What followed was a media storm, a public trial, and a series of psychiatric evaluations that would lead to one of the most controversial legal decisions in North Carolina history. But this story isn't just about a tragedy or a court ruling, it's about what happened after. Because just hours after the accident, Robert Morgan did something strange. He locked himself in his study, closed the blinds, and didn't emerge for 3 days, not even for the funerals. His wife Elena tried to explain it to family members, but she was as lost as everyone else. Inside that study, Robert played classical music on vinyl, pored over old journals, and scrawled pages of cryptic notes that wouldn't make sense until later. Much later. He claimed he could feel Lily and Maya in the house, not just their memory, their presence. He said he heard them whispering from the stairwell, that their favorite dolls, boxed up in the attic, moved on their own, that their old room suddenly smelled like lavender and cinnamon, Lily's favorite scent. And then came the dream, a vivid, relentless dream that haunted Robert for days. He saw his daughters in a field of snow, not cold or afraid, but waiting, smiling, and in the dream they whispered the same thing again and again. "We're coming back, Daddy. Don't be sad. We're coming back." And maybe you'd dismiss that, grief twisting a father's mind, but what if they did come back? What if some children are not born for the first time, but return? This is the story of the Morgan twins. A story of uncanny resemblance, impossible memories, and a mystery that tests the limits of science, faith, and sanity. It will challenge everything you think you know about life, about death, and what might lie in between. If this story grips you already, if you're feeling the pull to understand what really happened to the Morgan family, then I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more of these true, haunting stories to light and keeps this archive of darkness alive. A simple click helps more than you know. Now, before we move to part 2, I have a small challenge for you. Do you believe in reincarnation? A. Yes, I think our souls can return in another life. B. No, I believe death is the end. Drop your answer in the comments below with an A or B. I want to see where this audience stands before we dive deeper. You might just change your mind by the time we reach the end. Stay with me. The truth only gets darker from here. Part 2. Sunday's silence. The accident that shattered everything. When Elena Morgan discovered she was pregnant again, it didn't feel like a miracle. It felt like betrayal. The grief from losing Lily and Maya was still raw, hanging in the air of their Asheville home like an unspoken ache. For Elena, every creaking stair or wind-touched curtain carried their absence. So when the pregnancy test turned positive, she didn't smile. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, silent, afraid of what it meant, afraid of what Robert would say, and he did say something strange. He didn't weep with joy or fall to his knees in gratitude. He simply looked at her with that hollow stare he had adopted ever since the accident and said, "They're coming back." Elena didn't understand at first. Who? He stepped closer, almost whispering now. "Lily. Maya. You'll see." That was the moment her fear deepened into something else. Not just grief, not just confusion, but doubt. Doubt in the man she had married. Doubt in her own mind. Because Robert was convinced, beyond reason or logic, that this wasn't just a new pregnancy. It was a continuation, a return, a second chance given by a force neither of them fully understood. He called it a divine loop, scribbled about it in his journals, cited fragments from reincarnation texts, even pulled dusty books from their attic storage, titles Elena had never seen before. Robert claimed he had seen it in a dream weeks before she even missed her period. The girls in white dresses, laughing in the snow, whispering that they were on their way. He told Elena that everything, the accident, the dream, the pregnancy, was part of some cosmic answer. A cruel one, perhaps, but an answer nonetheless. Elena wanted to dismiss it as madness, just the ravings of a grieving father desperate for meaning. And yet, the further her pregnancy progressed, the more her resistance softened. Not because Robert convinced her, but because the pregnancy itself became strange. Doctors initially believed she was carrying a single baby. All the early ultrasounds showed one heartbeat, but by the 4th month everything changed. A new scan revealed 2 fetuses, identical twins. The doctor was puzzled. "It's rare," he said, "but it happens. Sometimes one hides behind the other." Elena stared at the screen in silence. Robert didn't. He placed his hand on the monitor, smiled, and whispered, "They found their way back." She wanted to believe it was just coincidence. Just a normal, albeit surprising, pregnancy. But coincidences began piling up like whispers in the dark. One night, Elena dreamt of Maya's voice calling out from the hallway. The next morning, she found one of Maya's old hair clips on the bathroom counter. Something she had boxed away and sealed months earlier. More than anything, Elena began to feel the shift within herself. Her body wasn't just changing with pregnancy, it was remembering. The twins' kicks mirrored the rhythms she recalled from carrying Lily and Maya. The same sharp jabs under the ribs, the same sleeping patterns. She began journaling, trying to map the impossible, aligning movements, cravings, even emotional shifts with her past pregnancy. It was as though her body, too, recognized them. Robert, meanwhile, was transformed. For the first time in months, he began leaving his study. He stopped listening to requiems and started building furniture for the nursery. He called the unborn twins by name, not new names, the old ones. Lily's crib should be by the window, he'd say. She always loved the sunlight. Elena tried to stop him, to ask him to wait until the girls were born. What if it's not them? she asked one night, trembling. What if this is something else, just new life, not old souls? He shook his head. They told me. They remember. You will too. There was something terrifying in the certainty of his voice. Not violent, not even insistent, but unwavering, as if he'd already seen it all and was merely waiting for the world to catch up. When the twins were born in late October, under an amber Asheville sky, the room fell into an eerie hush. Not because of complications, but because the newborns bore marks, one with a faint scar above her right eyebrow, just like Maya's had been from a childhood fall, the other with a small birthmark near her hip, the exact same spot where Lily had had one. Elena stared at them, eyes wide. They looked nothing like newborns to her. They looked familiar. Not similar, familiar. And in that quiet hospital room, with the autumn wind pressing against the glass, she began to wonder, had they ever truly left? The question haunted her as she cradled them, and as Robert whispered their names, not new ones, but the names they had carried before. Lily. Maya. And when the nurse gently asked if they had decided on names, Robert didn't hesitate. Yes, he said. They've always been with us. Part 3. Grief, Faith, and a Dangerous Prayer. The air in the Morgan home shifted in the weeks that followed the birth of the twins. What was once a place of grief and quiet mourning began to hum with an unfamiliar rhythm, one of cautious hope and something far stranger. Elena could feel it every time she held the babies. Lily and Maya, though just newborns, didn't feel new. There was an eerie depth to their eyes, a stillness in the way they looked at her, as if they were already listening, already remembering. Robert leaned into the mystery with an almost religious fervor. To him, the twins were living proof of what he'd long believed, that life doesn't end, it changes form, that souls do not die, they return when they're ready. He filled his journals with observations, noting the twins' movements, sleep patterns, even the way they gripped his fingers. Maya always held my pinky like this, he said one morning, as the infant curled her tiny hand around his. She used to do it when I read her bedtime stories. Elena wanted to argue, to dismiss it as projection, grief masquerading as recognition. But the unease wouldn't leave her. One night, as she rocked Lily to sleep, she hummed an old lullaby, something she had once sung to Maya without ever writing it down. Halfway through, Lily stirred in her arms and cooed in perfect time with the melody, as though she recognized it, as though she knew what came next. Elena's voice faltered, her arms trembled. There was no way the infant could know that song, no logical explanation. The anomalies continued. One afternoon, Elena walked into the nursery to find the girls cooing at the mobile above their cribs. But what caught her breath was how they reached toward it, not with the awkward flailing of babies, but in tandem, synchronously, as if they were playing a game only they understood. She stood frozen at the door, watching the way they looked at each other. It wasn't just recognition, it was familiarity. That invisible thread between siblings had always been strong with Lily and Maya. Now, it was alive again. What disturbed her most, however, wasn't the similarities in habits or even the unexplainable reactions. It was the moments of silence. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, Elena would wake to find the twins wide awake in their crib, staring at each other. Not crying, not fussing, just watching. Communicating, it seemed, without a sound. When she picked one of them up, the other would follow her with their eyes, as though guarding a shared secret. Robert wasn't disturbed by any of this. He was elated. They remember, he said often. The bond is deeper than the body. You see it now, don't you? Elena didn't know what she saw. Her reality had begun to blur. Even her dreams were changing, more vivid, more intense. In them, she saw Lily and Maya not as toddlers, but older, whispering secrets into the ears of their newborn selves. In one, she saw them standing in the garden where they once played, turning to her and saying, "We came back for you, Mommy, but it hurts to remember." That line haunted her. What did it mean for a soul to return? Was it a blessing or a burden? It was then that Elena began documenting everything, not just out of curiosity, but necessity. She needed to make sense of what was unfolding. She began recording videos, taking notes, tracking behaviors. She noticed that Jennifer, the twin Robert insisted was Maya reborn, gravitated toward a stuffed bear Maya had once loved. No one had told her its significance. But the moment she laid eyes on it, she pulled it close and refused to let it go. It became her constant companion. Julienne, who Robert believed was Lily, had an unmistakable attachment to Robert's old flannel shirt, the same one Lily used to snuggle into during winter movie nights. Elena found her curled up with it one morning, fast asleep, as if it offered comfort from a time she couldn't possibly remember. These weren't just coincidences anymore. The weight of them, the consistency, was impossible to ignore, and yet Elena wasn't ready to speak it aloud, not yet. To speak it would be to give it life, to accept it as truth. But truth was becoming harder to define. Was it science or soul, grief or gift? She didn't know. All she knew was this: the more time passed, the more the line between past and present blurred. Her daughters were gone, and somehow, impossibly, they had returned. But at what cost? Part 4. A prophecy fulfilled. The birth of the twins. The mornings grew colder as the weeks passed, and with each day, Elena found herself sinking deeper into a quiet dread she couldn't shake. Her days, once filled with the small joy of raising her twins, now became an exhausting cycle of contradictions. The twins were growing fast, too fast, it seemed, but it wasn't just their physical development that unsettled her. It was the way they moved together, like two sides of the same soul, their actions mirroring each other's with an uncanny precision. Robert, in his unwavering belief, seemed to be thriving in this strange new reality. To him, it was clear that their daughters had come back to them. He would speak of the girls as if they had never truly left. He spoke about Maya and Lily with an ease that almost frightened Elena. To him, the girls' return was nothing short of miraculous. But for Elena, each passing day felt like walking a fine line between acceptance and denial. She was beginning to question everything she thought she knew about life, death, and the fragile threads that connected them. The twins had always shared a connection even before they were born. It was a bond that transcended the ordinary, the kind of bond that people often spoke about in passing but never truly understood. Now, as Elena watched them grow, she couldn't escape the overwhelming sensation that there was something more at play here, something far beyond the boundaries of what the human mind could comprehend. One evening, after tucking the twins into their cribs, Elena went to check on them one last time before she turned in for the night. As she approached their room, she saw them sitting up, their tiny bodies silhouetted against the dim light from the hallway. They were awake, wide-eyed and still, and they turned to her at the same moment, their gazes locking with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. Elena froze at the door, heart pounding. There was something unsettling in the way they stared at her, as though they knew something she didn't, as though they were waiting for her to ask the question she couldn't bring herself to ask. "Mommy?" Maya spoke, her voice small and ethereal like the whisper of a breeze. "We're not done yet." Elena blinked, convinced she hadn't heard correctly. The words didn't make sense. Maya was only a baby, no more than a year old. How could she be speaking in such a way? And what did she mean? Before she could process her thoughts, Lily, the quieter of the two, reached out and touched Elena's hand. It was the kind of touch a child gives when they want comfort, but there was something more in it, something that carried a weight Elena couldn't ignore. "Don't be scared," Lily said softly. "We came back for you." Her breath caught in her throat. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as though the walls were closing in around her. She tried to rationalize it. Perhaps it was just the exhaustion, the stress of the past months catching up to her, but the way the twins spoke to her, it didn't feel like a child's innocent words. It felt like a message, a warning. The next few days were a blur of uncertainty. Elena tried to focus on the everyday, feeding the girls, changing diapers, playing with them, but each moment was shadowed by the conversation she could no longer shake. Every time she looked at the twins, their faces were the same, yet somehow different. There was something beyond their eyes, a depth she hadn't seen before. One night, as she watched the girls sleep, Elena couldn't keep the question inside her any longer. She leaned over them, brushing their soft hair back from their faces, her heart aching with a pain she didn't fully understand. "Who are you?" she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "What are you?" The twins stirred, but they didn't wake. Their eyes remained closed, but Elena could feel their presence, their silent understanding of something she was not ready to face. In that moment, Elena understood. The grief she had felt when she lost her daughters, Maya and Lily, was not the end. It was merely the beginning of something far more complicated, far more profound than she could ever have imagined. The twins were not just the children she had once held in her arms. They were a continuation of something that transcended time, something ancient and unknowable. They were a part of her past, her present, and her future, a living enigma that she had no choice but to accept. But acceptance came with its own price. Elena was beginning to feel the weight of the truth settle on her chest, suffocating her with each breath. She had prayed for a sign, for an answer to the questions that haunted her, but this was more than she could have ever imagined. As the twins grew, so did the tension in the Morgan household. Robert, ever the believer, spoke of the girl's miraculous return to anyone who would listen, but Elena remained silent, the weight of her unspoken thoughts heavy in her mind. She had to admit, no matter how much she wanted to resist, that the twins were not just a symbol of hope. They were something else, something she couldn't define, and it terrified her. Each day Elena moved through the motions of motherhood, but in the back of her mind she was always wondering, what was really happening? What had happened to Maya and Lily, and what did it mean for the future? The past had returned to her in the form of two innocent faces, and the world as Elena knew it would never be the same. Part 5. Echoes of the Past. The Twins Remember. As the months passed, the creeping sense of unease grew in Elena's chest. The twins, Maya and Lily, seemed to be flourishing, their little lives progressing with a rapidity that seemed almost unnatural. They spoke in perfect unison, their movements synchronized with eerie precision, as though they were two halves of a whole. Yet, despite their perfect harmony, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. They weren't just growing up, they were growing into something. The more Elena observed them, the more she became convinced that the twins were hiding something from her. Their strange behaviors had started to intensify. They would talk to each other in soft, unintelligible whispers, their eyes darting around as if they were communicating with someone or something beyond this world. Their games, once innocent and playful, had taken on a strange, unsettling quality. On one particular evening, Elena walked into the twins' room to check on them, a habit she'd grown into, as the weight of her worries never fully left her. The room was eerily quiet, and for a moment she thought the twins had fallen asleep early. but as she stepped closer, she saw Maya sitting up in bed, her eyes wide and fixed on something just out of sight. Lily, too, was awake, but she wasn't looking at anything in the room. Instead, her gaze was distant, focused on something beyond Elena's comprehension. "Maya?" Elena asked softly, her heart beginning to race. Maya's head turned slowly toward her, her eyes filled with an intensity that sent a chill down Elena's spine. There was a strange, knowing look in them, as though Maya were seeing something that Elena couldn't. "We're here," Maya said, her voice eerily calm. Elena froze. "What do you mean, sweetie?" Lily turned her head at that moment, and in perfect unison with Maya, she said, "We've always been here." Elena's pulse quickened, her breath catching in her throat. She looked at the twins, her mind swirling. There was something in their voices that didn't belong to children. They spoke with the wisdom of someone far older, their words laced with a knowingness that was both comforting and terrifying. "Who are you?" Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. She wasn't sure if she was asking the twins or something else, something that lurked in the shadows of the room, in the spaces between the words. Maya smiled faintly, but it wasn't the smile of a child. It was a smile that spoke of something ancient, something that had seen far too much. "We're your daughters," she said, as if it was the simplest thing in the world. Elena's heart skipped a beat. "But you're not..." She couldn't finish the sentence. The twins, Maya and Lily, were her daughters, but they were not her daughters. They were something else. The room seemed to close in around her. It was as though the walls were pressing against her, and the air had become thick with a weight she couldn't explain. The twins were no longer innocent little girls in Elena's eyes. They were vessels of something far older, something that didn't belong in this world. The words Maya had spoken echoed in her mind, their meaning sinking deeper with each passing moment. "We've always been here." Had Maya and Lily been here before? Was it possible? Was this some twisted version of reincarnation? Or had she lost her grip on reality, unable to separate grief from truth? Elena sat on the edge of their bed, her head spinning. The twins watched her, their eyes never leaving her face. It was as if they were waiting for her to understand something she wasn't yet ready to comprehend. In the silence that filled the room, Elena could almost hear the hum of an otherworldly presence. A presence that seemed to have filled the space long before she ever stepped foot inside it. Her thoughts scattered, and the rational part of her mind tried desperately to make sense of the situation. She thought back to the night she had first questioned their return, the fear that had gripped her chest. But now there was no escaping the truth, however twisted it might be. She had asked for a sign, and this was it. The twins, Maya and Lily, had returned, but they were not the children she remembered. They were something more. Elena's mind raced with questions, but there were no answers. Only silence. Was it possible that this was her punishment? Had her grief been so all-consuming that it had created this twisted reality? Or was there something else at play? Something far beyond her understanding? The twins remained still, their eyes locked onto hers, their faces unreadable. There was no comfort in their gaze, no reassurance. Only the cold, unyielding truth that Elena had been avoiding. The past had returned, but it had not come back in the form she had hoped for. This was not a miracle. This was something far darker, something she could no longer ignore. "I don't know what's happening," Elena whispered, her voice trembling. Maya's smile never wavered. "You don't need to know," she said softly. "Not yet." The weight of her words settled heavily on Elena's heart. Whatever this was, whatever had happened to her family, it was beyond anything she had imagined. It was something that would change everything. And as the days turned into weeks, Elena would find herself unable to escape the pull of the twins' presence, unable to free herself from the unspoken promise they had made. one that would lead her down a path from which there would be no return. Part 6. The Hidden Truth. Elena's Revelation. As the days stretched on, the unease that had once been a quiet whisper in Elena's mind now became a loud, insistent drumbeat. She could no longer ignore the strange, almost supernatural connection between Maya and Lily. Every day they exhibited behaviors that defied logic, behaviors that went beyond the realm of childhood imagination. There was something profoundly unsettling about how they seemed to know things they shouldn't have known. Elena had dismissed their oddities at first. The synchronized movements, the whispered conversations in a language she couldn't quite understand, and the way their eyes would lock with such intensity as though they shared a bond that transcended time. But now, with each passing day, the connection between them became impossible to ignore. One evening, after a particularly long day of trying to shake the growing sense of dread, Elena decided to confront them. It had been weeks since they had spoken those strange words, "We've always been here." Since that moment, she couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just the children she had lost. They were something more, something ancient, something far beyond her understanding. She found them sitting in the living room, their small hands folded neatly in their laps, their eyes locked on the flickering television screen. The room, bathed in the soft glow of the evening light, felt heavy with a strange presence. Elena stood in the doorway, watching them for a long moment. Their silence was deafening. It was as if they were waiting for her, waiting for something that Elena had yet to grasp. "Maya, Lily?" Elena began, her voice steady but filled with an anxiety she couldn't quite hide. "I need to understand what's happening. You've been acting so strange. You say things that don't make sense. I need to know." "Please?" Maya looked up first, her eyes wide and unblinking as if studying her every move. Then, as if reading Elena's thoughts, she spoke. "We've always been here, Mama. We just didn't know it until now." Lily's voice joined in, soft and sweet. "We've come back to help you. You asked for us. You called us here." The weight of their words hung in the air, the truth behind them both confusing and terrifying. Elena's heart raced as she tried to piece together what they were saying. Had she called them back? Was this some twisted form of fate, some cosmic force that had answered her deepest, most desperate wish to bring her daughters back from the dead? "You're not my daughters," Elena whispered, the words barely escaping her lips. "You can't be. My daughters are gone." But Maya simply smiled, that same eerie, knowing smile that had haunted Elena for weeks. "We are. We've just come back differently." The room seemed to darken around her, the walls closed in, and Elena's breath came in shallow gasps. She felt as though she were drowning in a sea of her own confusion and fear. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to run, to get away, but she couldn't. She couldn't turn her back on them. Not again. "Elena," Maya continued, her voice now laced with a certain softness, "we're here to help, to make things right. Don't you want to understand?" Elena's eyes filled with tears. She had wanted so badly to believe that somehow, some way, Maya and Lily had come back to her. She had wanted to believe in a miracle, that her daughters were alive again, that this was all some strange dream. But now, standing before her, she saw only the remnants of that dream. Shattered, broken, and twisted beyond recognition. She turned away, her heart heavy with grief. "I don't know what you are anymore," she choked out. "I don't know what's real." But Maya didn't let her pull away. She reached out and gently touched Elena's hand, her small fingers cold and unyielding. "We are real, Mama," she said softly. "We are just like before, only we've changed." In that moment, something in Elena's chest broke. The pain of losing her daughters all over again overwhelmed her, suffocating her, and yet she could not pull away, because beneath the terror, beneath the confusion, there was still a flicker of hope, a hope that maybe, just maybe, this was their chance to be a family again. But that hope was fragile, like glass, ready to shatter with the slightest wrong move. The truth was, Elena wasn't sure whether she wanted to believe them or whether she should be terrified of what they might represent. What if this wasn't a miracle? What if it was something far darker, something beyond human comprehension? As the days wore on, the twins continued to show more and more signs of their otherworldly connection. They would whisper to each other in strange tongues, their voices barely audible as though they were speaking to something or someone else. They would stand in the middle of the room, perfectly still, their eyes closed, as if listening to a voice only they could hear, and they would sometimes smile at nothing at all, as if they knew something Elena didn't. No matter how much she tried to distance herself, to tell herself that they were just children, Elena knew deep down that this was something far beyond her understanding. Maya and Lily were no longer the innocent girls she had once known. They were something else, something that had crossed a line between life and death, something that had returned to her in a form she could never have imagined. And so Elena was left in a constant state of turmoil. Her heart ached for the daughters she had lost. Yet these new beings who wore their faces and spoke their names seemed to be calling her to follow them into an unknown world, a world where the lines between life and death blurred, and nothing was what it seemed. Part 7, The Documentary Crew and National Spotlight. The days that followed were marked by an unease Elena couldn't quite escape. Every moment seemed clouded by a strange, unshakable feeling that something far beyond her comprehension was unfolding in her own home. The twins, Maya and Lily, continued to exhibit behaviors that blurred the line between the living and the spectral. They would speak to each other in voices that seemed too old for their small frames, their words often laced with knowledge no child should possess. But more than the words, it was their eyes that haunted Elena. They were filled with a depth, a knowing, as though they had seen things no one should ever witness. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a tomb, a place where time itself had become warped. Elena could no longer find solace in the familiar hum of daily life. The simple tasks of cooking, cleaning, and caring for her children had become rituals steeped in dread. No matter how much she tried to engage them in normal activities, Maya and Lily would pull her into conversations that made her heart race with fear. They would ask questions that only the dead could know, questions that would leave Elena's mind spinning in a vortex of disbelief. One evening, as the shadows grew long, Elena decided to confront the twins once more. She couldn't bear the silence between them any longer. She needed to know once and for all what was happening, whether this was truly a second chance to be a mother or something more insidious. Maya, Lily, Elena began, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to remain steady. Tell me, what is it you want from me? What is this? Why are you doing this to me? Maya, as always, was the first to answer. Her small face was set in a serene, almost detached expression, as if she were a creature beyond the world Elena knew. "We want to help you, Mama," she said softly, her words carrying a weight that felt ancient, eternal. "We want to fix what was broken. We've come back because you called us. You needed us." Lily echoed her twin's words, her voice barely a whisper. "You've always known we'd return. We never really left." Elena's heart clenched in her chest as she fought to hold back tears. "They've always known." Those words rattled through her mind, like the sound of chains rattling in the dark. The twins had said things like this before, but now they sounded so much more real. so much more final. She wanted to believe them, to hold on to the hope that her daughters were indeed back, that the impossible had somehow become reality. But there was something so unsettling about their presence, something so otherworldly, that it filled her with both yearning and terror. But how? How can this be? Elena whispered, feeling as though her world was collapsing around her. How can you be here? What do you really want from me? Maya's gaze never wavered from her mother's, and for a moment it felt like time itself had stopped. "We are part of you, Mama," she said with a strange, unearthly calmness. "We always have been. We were never truly gone." Lily reached out then, her small hand brushing Elena's arm, her fingers cold to the touch. "We're here to fix what you couldn't," she added, "to help you understand." Elena felt a shiver run through her body at Lily's touch. It was as if the warmth of life had been drained from her daughter's very being, leaving them cold and distant. Every moment with them was beginning to feel like a waking nightmare, one that she couldn't escape no matter how hard she tried. The following days were filled with increasing tension. The twins seemed to grow more distant with each passing moment, their personalities shifting, as if they were caught between two worlds, one that still held the innocence of childhood, and one that teetered on the edge of something dark and unknowable. They would often disappear into the shadows of the house, speaking in hushed tones, as if conversing with someone, or something, that Elena couldn't see. She couldn't deny it any longer. They weren't just her daughters. They weren't just children. They were something else, something far beyond her understanding. And yet, Elena couldn't help but cling to the hope that they might be right, that somehow, in some way, Maya and Lily were truly her daughters, returned from the void of death to heal the wounds that had torn their family apart. Every moment with them, as disturbing as it was, felt like a gift, a second chance. But at what cost? One evening, as she watched the twins play outside in the fading light of dusk, Elena's mind drifted back to the day they had died, the day that had shattered her heart beyond repair. How could she ever move past that? How could she reconcile the loss of her daughters with the strange, eerie reality before her now? As the twins ran across the yard, laughing and playing in a way that felt almost too normal, Elena realized something. No matter how hard she tried to make sense of it all, she couldn't shake the feeling that Maya and Lily weren't simply trying to find their way back to her. They weren't just trying to return to the life they once had. No, they were here for something far greater and far darker than Elena could ever have imagined. They were trying to fix something, but what? And why did it feel like they weren't just healing old wounds, but opening new ones that Elena could never close? The questions swirled in Elena's mind, leaving her with a sense of dread so powerful it threatened to consume her entire being. And as night fell over the house, she realized that she might never know the truth of what was happening. All she could do was wait and wonder. Would she ever truly understand the dark, hidden truths about Maya and Lily? Or would she forever be trapped in a waking nightmare, struggling to hold on to a reality that seemed to slip further and further from her grasp? Part 8. The Fracture. Family Secrets Revealed. Elena's world had become a never-ending cycle of confusion and fear. The twins, Maya and Lily, were not the same children they had been before. Their quiet ways, their unsettling maturity, and their knowledge that stretched far beyond their years were no longer simply strange, they were terrifying. Elena had hoped for answers, for closure, but with each passing day, the mystery surrounding her daughters only deepened. As the weeks went on, Elena began to notice that something was changing in Maya and Lily. At first, it was subtle, a soft shift in their behavior, a new way of looking at things. But soon it became impossible to ignore. The girls seemed to have gained an almost uncanny ability to see things she couldn't. When Elena would sit in the living room, lost in her thoughts, Maya and Lily would occasionally approach her, eyes wide, as if they had been listening to something or someone she couldn't hear. The twins had always been close, but now they seemed to share a bond that went beyond their twin connection. It was almost as if they were connected to something, someone beyond the veil. One particular evening, as the sun sank low into the horizon, casting the house into a golden haze, Elena sat with the twins in the kitchen, watching them play with their dolls. It should have been a comforting scene, normal even, but Elena could not shake the gnawing unease in her chest. The silence between the twins had grown heavier. Maya looked at her sister with an almost knowing smile, a smile that made Elena's stomach twist with dread. "Mama," Maya said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, "do you remember the day we died?" Elena froze, her breath catching in her throat. The question, so innocently asked, felt like a knife cutting through the fragile calm she had tried to maintain. She looked at Maya, her eyes wide with disbelief. Maya's face remained calm, as if the question were just another casual inquiry. Lily, too, was silent, her gaze fixed on her doll. "Maya," Elena's voice faltered as she tried to find the right words. "What do you mean? You didn't—" "We did," Maya interrupted softly, cutting Elena off. "We died, Mama, but we're here now, and we've come back to make it right." Elena's heart pounded in her chest, the air around her feeling thick and suffocating. It was as if the room itself was closing in, the walls pressing against her as the weight of Maya's words crashed down upon her. The twins had spoken of their past lives before, but never so openly, never with such certainty. "But how? How do you remember that?" Elena managed to whisper, her mind racing to comprehend the impossible. "How can you know that?" Lily's eyes met her mother's, and for the first time, Elena saw something in them. Something that felt ancient and wise, something that made her stomach churn. "We remember everything, Mama," Lily said, her voice calm yet unsettling. "We've always remembered. We've always known." Elena's mind reeled. How could they remember their death? How could they speak so matter-of-factly about something so horrific? But before she could ask more, the twins turned to each other, exchanging a quiet, knowing glance. It was then that Elena realized they had known long before she did. They knew something she couldn't even begin to understand. "I want to show you something, Mama," Maya said, her voice suddenly soft and eerie, as if the words were not entirely her own. Elena looked at her daughter, unsure of what to expect. She had always been the protective mother, the one who could shield her children from harm, but now she felt helpless. The girls stood and walked toward the back door without a word, the creaking floorboards echoing through the house like a warning. "Elena," Maya said, her back still turned, "it's time for you to see." The air outside was cool, a sharp contrast to the warmth inside the house. The twins led Elena through the yard, their small hands clasped together, their steps in perfect sync. They stopped near a large oak tree at the edge of the property, the shadow of the tree stretching across the ground like an omen. Elena's heart skipped a beat when she saw it. A small crumpled object lying near the roots of the tree. She knelt down to examine it, her breath hitching as she recognized what it was. A photo, old and weathered by time, with two small girls smiling back at her from the past. Maya crouched beside her mother, her hand gently touching the picture. "This is us, Mama," she whispered, her voice heavy with meaning. "This is when we were still alive." Elena's mind swirled with disbelief. She had never seen this picture before, but here it was, in the very spot where the twins had fallen just weeks ago. She could feel her knees weaken as the gravity of what was happening settled over her. The twins had been right. They had died, and now they were back. But for what purpose? "Mama," Lily said, her voice breaking through Elena's haze, "we've come back to make things right. We have to fix what was wrong." Elena didn't know what that meant, but she knew that her world, her reality, had been irrevocably shattered. The sense of dread that had gnawed at her for so long finally burst through, leaving her breathless. Whatever force had brought the twins back, it wasn't finished with her yet. And as Elena looked into the faces of the two girls who were supposed to be her daughters, she realized that nothing could ever be the same again. As the moon rose in the sky, casting its silver glow over the yard, Elena felt a chill run down her spine. There was no going back now. The questions, the doubts, the fear, they would all remain, gnawing at her. But she knew one thing for certain: Maya and Lily were not the same children she had lost. They were something else. Something that might never fully belong to her again. And as the night deepened, Elena's journey into the darkness had only just begun. Part 9. Ivy's Voice. The twins' testimony. The unease that had plagued Elena for so long was now a living thing, breathing down her neck, lingering in the corners of every room. It had grown from a faint whisper into a cacophony she could no longer ignore. Her daughters, Maya and Lily, had become the center of her existence. But they were no longer the children she had once known. The eerie stillness that had crept into their mannerisms now felt like an invisible force pressing against her, suffocating her. It was as though they were not the same, but rather something else, something foreign to the world Elena had known. Every moment with them had become a surreal blur, a constant question of what was real and what was not. In the quiet of the night, Maya would still whisper things that left Elena shaking, things no child her age should know. "We weren't supposed to be back yet, Mama," Maya would say with a calmness that chilled Elena to her core. "But we've come to fix things. We must fix the mistake." And though she had no idea what this mistake was, Elena felt herself growing more and more helpless by the day. Her once peaceful home had turned into a place of ever-growing tension, as though the walls themselves were closing in. The air around the twins felt charged with an unknown power, as if the very essence of life had been altered. There were nights when Elena would wake to find them standing by her bed, their eyes wide and knowing, speaking in soft, cryptic tones that seemed to come from somewhere beyond their years. It was as though their souls were not fully present in their bodies, as if something else had taken up residence inside them, something beyond Elena's understanding. One afternoon, as Elena sat in the living room, the weight of the day pressing heavily on her shoulders, Maya approached her with an expression that seemed too old for a child of her age. Her gaze was distant, almost hollow, as though she were seeing something that Elena could not. "Do you remember, Mama?" Maya asked softly. "Do you remember when we were here but not really here?" The question sent a wave of nausea through Elena. The words were not just strange, they were chilling. Maya had asked this same question before, but each time it felt different, more urgent. It was as though the little girl standing before her was trying to reach into some deep, buried memory and force it to the surface. But the harder Elena tried to grasp it, the further away it seemed. "I do remember," Elena whispered, almost to herself. "But I don't understand." "We were waiting for you," Maya said, her voice eerily calm. "But we weren't supposed to wait here. We were supposed to move on, to go to another place. But we were pulled back. We brought ourselves back. And now, Mama, we have to finish what we started." Lena's heart pounded. The words echoed in her mind like a deep, unrelenting drumbeat. The twins had spoken of these things before, but never with such conviction, never with such a sense of purpose. What had they been sent back for? What was the mistake they had to correct? These questions, once simple curiosities, now felt like an insurmountable wall she could not scale. The fear gnawed at her insides, a constant companion that refused to be ignored. That evening, Elena decided to confront the twins. She could no longer bear the weight of the uncertainty, of the unanswered questions that festered in her mind. The house had grown too quiet, the silence between them too heavy. She needed to understand, to find the truth, no matter how impossible it might seem. "Maya," Elena began, her voice shaky but determined. "Lily, tell me what you mean. What mistake are you talking about? What do you have to fix?" The twins exchanged a look, a knowing glance that Elena could not decipher. It was as though they were communicating with each other in a language that was beyond her comprehension, a language made up of glances and silent cues. And then, without a word, they stood and walked out of the room, leaving Elena in a whirlwind of confusion and dread. She followed them, her heart hammering in her chest. She couldn't let them slip away without answers, not again. But as she reached the door, she paused. The house felt different. The air had thickened, and a strange hum seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. Elena felt a sudden wave of vertigo, a sensation that the ground beneath her feet wasn't quite solid anymore. She felt as though she were standing on the edge of something vast and unknowable, a precipice she was afraid to look over. Maya and Lily had stopped by the staircase, their backs to her, standing perfectly still. The silence stretched out, unbearable. It was as though time itself had frozen, and Elena was trapped in a moment that held its breath, waiting for something, waiting for her to make a choice. "Mama," Lily said softly, her voice almost a whisper, "you need to trust us." Trust them? Trust them with what? Elena's throat tightened as she tried to make sense of the words. But as she looked at the twins, her daughters but not her daughters, she realized something. She did trust them. And perhaps that was the most terrifying part of all, because deep down she knew that whatever had brought them back, whatever force had given them life again, was something she could never control. As the days passed, Elena's once peaceful world continued to unravel layer by layer. The house, once filled with the ordinary sounds of family life, now felt like a haunted space, a place where the rules of reality no longer seemed to apply. The fear that had gripped her was no longer something she could push away. It was part of her now, part of the house, part of everything. And all she could do was watch as the twins, with their strange, otherworldly knowledge, led her into the unknown. No one else would understand this. No one could. This was her burden to carry, their burden to carry. Whatever lay ahead, Elena knew that there was no turning back now. Part 10. The End of the Beginning. A New Life. A Last Goodbye. Elena stood at the edge of the stairwell, the dim light from the hallway flickering, casting long shadows across the room. Her heart pounded relentlessly in her chest as she gazed at Maya and Lily, still standing motionless at the top of the stairs. The air had thickened in the house, a tangible heaviness that seemed to weigh down on her. The house, once a place of comfort and warmth, now felt cold, haunted by something otherworldly, something that refused to be explained away. The twins had changed, there was no doubt about it. Maya, once a playful, energetic child, now carried a heaviness in her eyes that reflected a depth far beyond her years. Lily, too, had an unsettling quietness, as though she knew things she shouldn't, things that even Elena couldn't begin to comprehend. But it was more than just their behavior, it was their very presence. They no longer felt like the children she had known and loved. It was as if they were both here and not here at the same time, tethered to a world that Elena could not reach. "Maya, Lily," Elena called softly, but her voice trembled with uncertainty. "What is it you're trying to tell me? Why do I feel this this unease when I'm around you. What happened to you?" The twins did not turn to her immediately. Instead, they stood perfectly still, like two statues carved from stone, their eyes locked on something that wasn't there. It was as though they were listening to a sound only they could hear, a sound that Elena could never be a part of. She felt a sudden coldness crawl over her skin, a creeping dread that coiled tightly around her chest. Then finally Maya spoke. Her voice was eerily calm, with a certainty that sent chills down Elena's spine. "You don't understand, Mama," Maya said, her eyes piercing through Elena, as though seeing right through her. "We were sent back for a reason. We weren't supposed to be here, not yet. We have work to do?" Elena's breath caught in her throat. The words were familiar, but not in the way they should have been. Maya's voice held an unnatural resonance, a tone that suggested a truth buried beneath the surface, one that Elena wasn't sure she was ready to face. The air felt oppressive, and Elena could feel her pulse quicken as her mind raced for an explanation that made sense, but none came. "We have to fix it, Mama," Lily added softly, her voice a quiet echo of Maya's. "It's why we came back. We can't leave until it's done." The cryptic nature of their words gnawed at Elena's insides. The sense of displacement, of something fundamentally wrong, was undeniable. It was as though the children who had once filled this house with laughter and light were now strangers, visitors from another realm, speaking in riddles she couldn't decipher. Elena felt trapped, unable to make sense of it all, but powerless to escape the growing sense of doom that surrounded her. "Maya. Lily." "What do you mean?" Elena whispered, her voice barely audible, as though speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile web of understanding she was desperately trying to weave. Maya turned her head slowly, her eyes locking onto Elena's with an intensity that made her heart stop. "It's not just us, Mama," she said, her voice laced with an unspoken gravity. "There are others. They are watching us. We're not alone in this." A shiver ran down Elena's spine. The words lingered in the air, thick with implication. They? Who were they? Who else was involved in this strange, terrifying saga? Elena's thoughts spiraled as the reality of the situation began to settle over her, suffocating her with its weight. The twins had spoken of something greater, something beyond her understanding, and now it was clear. Whatever had brought them back, whatever force was at play, it was far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The quiet in the house was suffocating, broken only by the muffled ticking of the old clock in the hallway. Elena stood frozen, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and a growing sense of inevitability. The feeling of being trapped, of being caught between two worlds, seemed to press in on her from all sides. The children she had given birth to, the children she had raised, were no longer the same. There was something else, something other. "I don't understand," Elena whispered, her voice barely a breath, her heart aching with the weight of what she was hearing. "I don't understand what's happening, what you are." Maya and Lily remained silent, their gazes fixed on Elena, unblinking, unyielding, and in that moment, Elena understood. There was no going back. She had crossed a line, stepped into a world that was not her own, a world where the rules no longer applied, and the children she had loved were no longer bound by the same laws of nature. The room seemed to close in on her, and for the first time in years, Elena felt truly alone. The quiet was deafening, and the darkness was no longer just outside. It was inside her, deep in her soul, twisting and clawing its way into her very being. Her family, her home, her life, it was all slipping away, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. And yet, despite the terror that gripped her heart, despite the dread that consumed her, Elena couldn't help but feel one thing. She had to see this through. Whatever this was, whatever it had become, she had to find out. For better or worse, there was no turning back now. In our own lives, we may not encounter the supernatural, but we are often faced with situations that challenge us in profound ways. Whether it's personal loss, the unknown future, or emotional pain, there are moments when we must choose whether to succumb to fear or rise above it. Like Elena, we can draw strength from the love we have for those close to us and use that love to guide us through the darkest of times. So what can we learn from Elena's experience? The story teaches us that while life may seem out of control at times, it is our response to these challenges that ultimately shapes our journey. Embrace the unknown, trust your instincts, and above all, hold on to the love and connections that matter most. Through fear and uncertainty, we have the power to find our way back to the light. Quiz time. Do you believe that facing the unknown and accepting the mysteries of life can help us grow stronger? A. Yes. Embracing the unknown can lead to growth. B. No, avoiding the unknown is safer. Feel free to drop your answers in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic. What do you think about Elena's journey and how she faced these challenges? Comment below and share your perspectives with others. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot and it motivates us to create more intriguing content like this. Stay tuned for more mysteries and stories. There's much more to come.